Gearbox has made a lot of games with a wide range of review scores, but what makes their best rated game the best and their worst rated one, well, a mess. Over the last 2.5 decades, Gearbox has been honing their craft, and as a result, have released many great games, including some of my favorites, which only made me more curious. What was so special about their beloved game, and what had to go wrong for them to create a game that is so universally disliked? So I took a dive into the deep end of development history, player response, and studio-wide controversies to see just how they can release one game labeled as the gold standard of sequels, and another one referred to as one of the worst games of the decade, less than just 6 months apart. It shouldn't be a surprise that Borderlands is Gearbox's best known franchise. With the original game releasing in 2009, its unique blend of RPG and FPS mechanics was a delight to so many players. Top that with very unique cel-shaded visuals and a procedurally generated gear system, and you have a brand new IP that became an instant hit. With the success of Borderlands and previous game projects, Gearbox gained a ton of confidence as a AAA developer. Some of it was earned, but too much confidence doesn't always end very well. In the year preceding, Gearbox was juggling 3 major game projects that would all be developed simultaneously. Among these 3 games was Aliens Colonial Marines. Aliens Colonial Marines was announced in 2008 with an ambitious launch date of 2009. Excitement was quickly building around the idea of this well-executed first-person shooter in the Aliens universe. Gearbox was hard at work, creating and innovating a groundbreaking new first-person shooter, and it was soon time for them to release what they've been working so vigorously on. Aliens Colonial Marines released. Wait, that's not right. Borderlands 1 released and was a well-received game that would become the studio's flagship franchise, but obviously it wasn't Colonial Marines. Back in 2008, Gearbox was faced with layoffs and internal challenges. As a result, development of Borderlands became the main focus while Colonial Marines took the back burner and eventually fell into development limbo over the course of the next couple of years. But this all changed when Gearbox took the stage at E3 in 2011. They re-announced the sci-fi FPS, following it up with an impressive gameplay presentation that featured intense exploration, atmospheric depth, and a strong enemy AI. In doing so, Gearbox was able to captivate players and rebuild anticipation to new heights just in time for the game's release. Aliens Colonial Marines was released in 2013, backed by impressive gameplay demos and the assurance that the game's multiple delays were solely to guarantee its quality. Colonial Marines topped the sales charts in the first week and sold over 1 million units in the first month, but when players finally booted it up for the first time, they were met by a much different reality. A game with low-resolution textures, poor atmospheric lighting, and just straight-up bad enemy AI. The difference between the finished product and the advertisement of the game was night and day. There was just simply no innovation to the FPS genre. Other than the name on the game cover, this game felt light years away from the Aliens universe. I mean, even the Xenomorphs, a creature with advanced stalking behavior, were just mindless enemies that would simply charge at the player. Therefore, the motion tracker, an iconic device used to locate these usually deceptive creatures, was basically useless. It would be understandable if you thought the bad enemy AI was just poor design, but years later, a modder would discover a single character typo in the game's code. A tiny mistake, once corrected, drastically improved the enemy AI. This small detail speaks volumes about the hurried, untested state of the final product. The culmination of all these visual and performance letdowns resulted in a flood of negative reception, ranging from mass critic disapproval to guttural anger from players. How did this happen? This wasn't just another poor performing game, this was a highly anticipated IP developed by the same minds who have created critically acclaimed FPSs. But in the end, it turned into a product described by Game Informer as a shooter that has no reason to exist. The the biggest confusion of it all was the years worth of promises of an innovative experience. And not just verbal promises either, actual visual showcases of a well-optimized and groundbreaking game. It was clear to everyone that the game that they were playing was definitely not the same game that was being advertised, and players weren't going to let Gearbox off the hook so easily. Less than 3 months after the release of Aliens Colonial Marines, a lawsuit was filed against Gearbox and Sega claiming the use of false advertisement. The outcome of this lawsuit painted a much better picture of what took place over the 6 years of development. According to sources, at the beginning of development in 2008, Gearbox began to move resources and funding off of Colonial Marines to work on Borderlands, while still collecting full payments from Sega. Once Sega found out, they pulled the funding off of Gearbox and Colonial Marines, and this is what led to the Gearbox layoffs back in 2008. In an attempt to course correct, Gearbox outsourced a significant portion of the game to other studios, while CEO Randy Pitchford ordered that a gameplay presentation be created that simply looked awesome without worrying about console performance restraints. And the result? Players with massive expectations and a low-budget game pieced together by multiple studios. As for the lawsuit, Gearbox and Randy Pitchford placed all the blame on Sega and stated that they were in charge of the advertisement, not Gearbox. Sega, while denying Randy Pitchford's statements, decided to settle and pay back a total of $1.2 million to gamers who purchased the game. Regardless of where the ultimate responsibility lies, the story of Aliens Colonial Marines is a tough lesson of false promises and development chaos, and ultimately stands as a reminder of what happens when ambition collides with mismanagement. But what's truly interesting about this story is that just a few months before this monumental flop, the very same studio released a game that critics would hail as the gold standard of sequels. How were they able to achieve this in such a seemingly dysfunctional atmosphere? And why did this game get so much more critical praise compared to Aliens Colonial Marines? After the immediate commercial success of Borderlands in 2009, Gearbox went straight to work into developing a sequel. With more ambition and a higher budget, they wanted to double down on what made the first game so great. The world of Pandora has a lot of potential, and much of it was well executed in the first game, but Gearbox also wanted to assure players that their constructive feedback, much of which revolved around a shallow storyline, would be addressed in a big way. With the return of what made the original game so successful, like a strong class system, along with the promise of addressing player feedback, hype for the game exploded. Borderlands 2 released September of 2012, and players were in awe. The game world was bigger and more vibrant, while still retaining that iconic cel-shaded art style. And one thing was clear, they definitely doubled down on what made Borderlands so special. The new classes were sort of an homage to the classes of the previous game, but they offered more customization and much more versatility in battle.
Nothing like a turret kill!
The loot system, which was already so complex, was overhauled, adding much more diversity between gun manufacturers. Torgue weapons always had explosive projectiles. Instead of reloading, TDR weapons were thrown like grenades. And bandit weapons always had high-capacity magazines. Even the environments were much more diverse. Everything that made the first game so great was even better in Borderlands 2. But what about Gearbox's promises of addressing player critiques of the first game, mainly its rather thin storyline? Well, to remedy this concern, Gearbox made the narrative of Borderlands 2 a top priority, making it 7 times longer than that of the first game. And it wasn't just simply longer, but extremely well thought out and well paced. The NPC's dialogue and lore was more interesting, and the layer of humor we threw out was perfectly timed, which leads me to arguably the developer's greatest achievement of all: Handsome Jack. A sort of hybrid between a charismatic elitist and a sarcastic a-hole, Handsome Jack solidified himself in the video game villain Hall of Fame. He would lurk around every corner to harmlessly mock you during minor setbacks.
Holy crap! Did you see your head? It was like...
But then would follow it up with violent murders and ruthless attacks. Sure, there were other great NPCs in Borderlands 2, but Handsome Jack single-handedly kept the story interesting and was the cherry on top of this masterly crafted sequel. Every aspect of the game felt like a conscious effort to perfect the formula, showing a clear passion from Gearbox to create something special. And the reception from both players and critics would confirm that Gearbox truly struck gold. Players shared very positive reviews for the game, stating that the loot chase was much more rewarding and the boss fights were more engaging. They also enjoyed how much more valuable content there was to work through compared to the first game. By now, it's clear that Borderlands 2 was a massive success, but again brings me back to my initial question. How could this extremely well-crafted, critically acclaimed game be developed alongside a monstrous failure like Aliens Colonial Marines? Well, I think two simple words can help us answer that: expectations and intentions. For both Colonial Marines and Borderlands 2, promises were made to players. Promises of great games that featured groundbreaking experiences. In both cases, response was the same: skyrocketing expectations. But the outcomes were dramatically different. While it was much to Borderlands 2's success to have so many players waiting to play a masterpiece, it was more like salt in the wound for Colonial Marines. Because honestly, going back to play it now, it's definitely not the worst game I've ever played. And in between the generic FPS gameplay, there is some fun to be had. But in the pursuit to make this middling game look evolutionary, Gearbox created a firestorm of legal issues and controversy. If Gearbox simply managed expectations properly, Aliens would have just been tossed into the bin of countless mediocre games based on Hollywood IP. And given the close proximity of release dates, the final determining factor at play for these two polar opposites comes down to intentions. From the start, it seemed as if Gearbox was never super passionate about Colonial Marines. It constantly took the back seat compared to other projects, and when it was time to hand off a game to other studios, it was the first to go. But Borderlands was different. The passion that Gearbox holds for its flagship IP is simply undeniable. Even at the expense of other projects, their intentions fully revolved around making the best possible experience for Borderlands fans. From the bazillions of guns to wacky characters, it was all made from a place of love. So while Aliens Colonial Marines may mark a dark side in Gearbox's history, let Borderlands 2 shine as a bright message, reminding us of how truly special a game can be when its creators are fueled by genuine passion. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed listening to me discuss the best and worst sides of Gearbox, clicking the video on your screen or clicking the like button allows me to make more content like this. Thanks again, and I hope to see you in the next one.